Today on CityCast DC, Waymos, the autonomous self-driving ride-hailing vehicles, are already cruising around DC. With one big catch. Under current DC law, there's still a human safety driver behind the wheel at all times. But will DC ever allow Waymos to fully operate in the city without a human driver behind the wheel? And more importantly, should it? The DC Council is considering a bill that could finally allow Waymo to operate in the district, but not without a fight. Labor unions, disability advocates, tech companies, and tech companies, and business leaders all packed a marathon hearing to debate what the future of transportation in DC should look like and who it should serve. My colleague, Ben Brasch, was there for many, many hours. Ben joins me today to explain where the debate stands and what the future of AVs in DC could look like. Today's Wednesday, July 15th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Ben, I saw your video from the Waymo hearing. I also read your reporting. It sounds like the whole thing lasted hours. Set the scene for me. What was the atmosphere like and who was there?
Yes, it lasted a very long time, Bridget. Before I even walked in, the hearing is supposed to start at 9:30. I roll up to the Wilson building, and there's a bunch of unions outside giving a press conference. And they're talking about how this technology is bad for them, it's bad for society, they can do their job way better than a robot can, etc. And then go into the council hearing room. It's pretty full. And we have all these like disparate kinds of people. We have people in lobbyist gray suits. We have people in like union T-shirts. We have like young adults. We have people from like all over the spectrum. And yes, the meeting was scheduled to start at 9:30, and we had 80 public speakers. So it was then set to wrap at 7:00 p.m. and we were running an hour late for most of it. So yeah, it was a party.
That sounds like a scene. I want to back up a little bit and just sort of think through how we got here because, much like being behind the wheel of a herky-jerky driver, DC has had a lot of starts and stops when it comes to autonomous vehicles. Can you catch us up on how we got here and why this issue is back before the council now?
Well, first of all, I see what you did there. Secondly, I can do that. So in 2012, it was when this kind of small infancy stage autonomous vehicle project from Google came with a blue Prius to DC and wanted to get the council engaged and excited about this. So they took 2 council members out for a ride, and they were like, oh my goodness, the future. And then they made a bill to kind of set the groundwork for bringing this to DC. That went fallow for a while. Wasn't much movement for about 5 or so years. In 2018, this popped back up. And so, like you say, there's been a lot of starts and stops. DC said, the DC government said, I want, council, that is, and mayor, I want a report from our transportation folks from DDOT to tell us like how we should handle this. And it was supposed to be due in October 2022. And that hasn't happened yet because, I don't know, government's hard. I don't know. But it hasn't happened yet. And people are frustrated about that. And so then these AV companies look toward not DDOT, but instead the council to kind of like apply pressure there and with the mayor to get this to move forward. And so that's kind of where we've seen, a lot of lobbyist dollars and also energy and movement.
So let's talk about some of the movement and energy that you saw at this hearing, because, I don't think anybody listening is surprised to know that I'm skeptical, I guess is the word I will use, about AVs in DC and sort of the kind of promises that tech companies can make to cities more generally. And so I'm trying to kind of hold that bias a little bit. But when I first came to this story, I had an idea in my head of sort of this being technology versus the people. From reading your reporting, I feel it really challenged my own pre-existing bias about the framing of this story, because it really sounded more like it was about competing public interests. You had all these different folks from different coalitions and backgrounds emerging to make their voices heard about AVs in DC. Can you break down who was at the hearing, who was for this and what they were saying, and who was against it and what they were saying?
Absolutely. So, first of all, we have these tech companies who are saying we are going to bring innovation, we are going to bring jobs, and all these sorts of things to the district. This can be the first place in the Mid Atlantic to have this kind of new technology. The kind of jobs we're talking about. So, Waymo has promised depots, charging depots, and cleaning depots in wards 5 and 7, which is great. Those places need traffic help for sure, right? So does all of DC, by the way. But the kind of jobs we're talking about, it could be people who are cleaning these cars. It could be technician, automotive techs, who are going to repair the car. They go through a lot of tires, running 24 hours a day, apparently, which is something I didn't think about. And so that's the technology side. Then the council, they're saying, oh boy, we have this emerging technology. Government's always on the back foot. Industry's always ahead of them. Classic stuff. How do we legislate this in a way to make it work for us? And the story that my brain goes to is I was in Atlanta for several years as a reporter down there. And when micromobility came to town, the e-scooters came to town, what they did was they just dropped them off in the middle of the night. They just dropped these scooters off in the middle of the night. And then people started loving them because, God bless it, MARTA is not good all the time at being a train system, getting people around town. That is the train system in Atlanta that I'm talking about. So people started loving them. And then the legislators were like, wait a second, what's just showed up in our town? What's going on? And then the companies had all the support of the citizens. People were like, we love these things. And they're like, okay, well, I guess we can't kick them out now. We have to figure out a way how to make it work. And, there's some legal wrangling, and they were like, oh, you guys shouldn't have done that. And they were like, what are we going to do? I'm big tech. You know what I mean? But people were already into it. And now we have scooters all over Atlanta for, that reason.
So this is exactly my big beef and where the root of my skepticism comes from. I
had a feeling this was going to animate you. Yes.
Yes. This is the big tech playbook. I've covered big tech for many years. This is their playbook of trying to get support from the public before it's really legal, before, everything is official, and rally people up, make it so that this is just a way of life, and then step back and say, oh, geez, I'm just a tech company. We're just some of the most powerful people in the world. We didn't know this was going to happen. And what frustrates me is that it feels like an act. When Waymo first made big promises about coming to DC, it really sort of sticks in my craw that when they first started talking about coming to DC, they were doing it with these big, splashy announcements. Waymo is coming to DC on this date. Never mind the fact that it was not, our current laws did not allow for there to be totally autonomous vehicles in the district. They were just making this big announcement. And I thought it was the same playbook where they were going to get people excited, whip people up to support this, make this something that people saw as commonplace already, and then use that to manufacture support. That was my issue. And I feel that if you are actually coming to a city because you respect the people, you respect the laws, you respect the lawmakers, you respect how things are done, I don't really appreciate coming into a city with that level of stunt that is meant to get people on your side so early. That's you've really teased out the root of my personal skepticism.
I love when I get to the root, when I hit a nerve. That's always good. Yes. That is the passion. That's where it's at. People don't appreciate that, is what you're saying. You have to follow the rules, unless you don't. And then here we are. You know what I mean? In a larger sense. Anyway.
Exactly.
Right. So some of the other players involved in this, it is like John and Jane Q. Public. We have people who are trying to get around DC. But some of the people who are really animated about this, the issues are so varied. We're talking about digital privacy. I'm just walking along the street. It's actually interesting. One question that Charles Allen, the council member who was running this hearing, had, and he said was one of the most common questions he had from members of the public, was this: can these radars see underneath my clothes?
I think that question gets into the sort of nitty-gritty of what folks are worried about and what this bill actually has to sort of address, that people are asking that level of question.
Waymo said, no, this cannot see under your clothes, by the way. And they were kind of incredulous. This is my opinion, is that they were kind of like, what? What are you doing asking that question? And the council member was like, no, seriously, this is one of the most common questions I get from people, because they have the cameras, they have the LiDAR, they have the radar, they have all this technology seeing 360 all the time. And people are like, is this like the airport? Can I opt out? Is it taking my picture? And Waymo says we blur these photos of license plates and people's faces. And then upon follow up, it's like, so wait, does that happen at the car level, or does that happen like in post? Like if you got like subpoenaed for this. So then it's like we go down that digital privacy rabbit hole. That's one thing. Not to mention, the energy consumption of these electric vehicles running around town. What is this going to do to DC's grid? Those answers weren't exactly clear from Waymo, and Waymo said, we're going to follow up with you. So I'd be very interested to see what that's going to do as rates are going up in DC. And then we also have some interesting community stakeholders. The disabled community is kind of a couple minds about this, right? It's not a monolith. This is a very large community. We're talking about millions of people with, varied needs. So those who use wheelchairs said this bill does not do enough for us because none of these vehicles are wheelchair accessible. And as you might remember, about 10 or so years ago, there was a whole lot of legal wrangling, a lot of lawsuits about Uber not offering wheelchair accessible vehicles to those who need it. And some of the people who were at the hearing said, we were involved in that legislation. I was a plaintiff in some of the early suits, and they were saying, I need to be able to use this technology. It's no good to me if I can't get in there. Waymo says, we don't make cars. So we are trying to find an electric vehicle that can work as an AV, that can work as a robotaxi, an autonomous vehicle. We're trying to find that, make it, and have one that's wheelchair accessible. And then another part of this community, a lot of people from a lot of federations and councils for blind folks and those who are low vision said this is going to change our lives. They said, I've never been in a car by myself. Something that a lot of us take for granted. And as good little Americans, right, we all want to live in our cars, right? They're an extension of our fiefdom. They're our second home. And to be an American and not be able to be alone in your car is a singular and different experience than a lot of people. And I found that fascinating. And also, one of the things that just like blew my mind. So a lot of people who are blind and low vision who use seeing eye dogs for guides, so much of their life is spent getting denied for Ubers and Lyfts because they say you can't let your dog in here, which is, by the way, illegal under the ADA. But people are like, I can't hear you, I'm already driving away. And so the things people have to do, there was a coworker of this one woman who's using a seeing eye dog in the meeting. He's also blind, but he doesn't use a dog. Said what he will do is he will order an Uber or Lyft sometimes. She will hide behind him. He will hop into the Lyft or whatever, and then she will scoot in quickly with her dog after. I think the word they used was to overwhelm the driver. Because it's like, there's two of us, man, and a dog. Like, we got to get in here. And that is how much time and energy they expend getting denied for rides completely illegally. So these AVs, there's no human to deny them. And so that would be a really big way for them to get around, a busy city that is not friendly to those who are blind.
And I think that really highlights something. I mean, people listening probably are thinking, well, the drivers who are denying people with service dogs are breaking the law. Think about how that actually goes down when you've got to get to the airport or an appointment and you've got your service dog or service animal and you're getting denied. Maybe you want to just be able to get where you're going and experience the autonomy and that many of us just take for granted, as you said. And that, I can hear somebody making the argument that, well, we should be fixing this systemic inequality. And I agree, but that's not necessarily what's happening at the curb on 14th Street when you got to get somewhere. And nor should it be the responsibility of this person to cajole these drivers into taking them where they need to go per the law.
That's exactly right. I mean, they shouldn't be in this situation, but the reality is that they are. And it's not okay, but they also live it. So it's just something we got to figure out. One stakeholder I forgot, the business community. So we had folks from Monumental, right? Monumental Sports, that'd be Capital One Arena folks. They say, we put on 200 events a year. We want you to do this so that way there are more people coming to our events. And then on the flip side of that, you have the unions. You have folks who are saying, this is anti-public transit. We make all these investments in public transit. Y'all talk about it all the time. And what are you doing? You're taking this single occupancy vehicle, you're trying to put it into our roadway. At a time when you have all these union drivers trying to get around it. One union driver, a Teamster, he spoke about seeing a Waymo, this is a tester one, kind of stuck in the middle, seeing which way to go, being confused. Now, that's interesting because there should be a human behind the wheel. because right now you can't have autonomous vehicles
What
in
was that
DC.
human doing?
Yeah, look, I can't judge. Life's hard. I'm not, Jeff Gordon. I'm not like a supremely great driver. They're saying this is going to clog the roadways. It's going to make life harder and less safe. And also, you are trying to take our jobs. You are trying to replace us with, robo-trucking is a ginormous concern for a lot of these unions. And so are any infringements upon public transit. I mean, the public transit unions are saying you cannot do this. This is contrary to all the investments we're trying to make.
Your reporting really illustrates the ways that Waymo has been really ramping up its lobbying and public outreach here in the district. How visible do you feel like that campaign has been, and does it seem like it's having an effect on local officials?
I would say here we are. It's got to be working if we're talking about it and if it's being brought before the council and there's all this movement on it. Bridget, I got to tell you, the vibe in the room is that this is happening and it's just how we want it to happen. And that's something that we do have control over. This legislation is trying to address just that. Waymo's driven over 300,000 miles throughout the district. They've mapped every single stitch of road, they say. And this is happening. But how are we as a society going to let this happen? How friendly, what are we going to require of these companies, all those things. And I should say, it's more than just Waymo. Tesla also had a representative there, and they're developing autonomous vehicles as well. So they're bought into this and are, very interested. There's also representatives from Uber and Lyft there on the, kind of other side of the coin.
Here is something from our sponsors at the DC Department of Behavioral Health. DC is turning a corner, and the numbers back it up. Fatal opioid overdoses dropped 33% in this city from 2023 to 2024. That's not just data, that's real people, real families, still together. But the work isn't done, and neither are we. If you or someone you love is struggling, help is closer than you think. Text LiveLongDC to 888-811 to connect with treatment, housing, and recovery support right here in the district. Free Narcan is available at nearly 40 locations across DC because nobody should lose someone for lack of access. And if you're in crisis right now, call or text 988. Know your worth, know your alternatives, know your value, know yourself. Recovery is possible. Find out how at knowyourpathdc.com.
Speaking of people who are bought in, let's talk about Councilmember Charles Allen, because he said, listen, DC needs to get ahead of this technology rather than just letting it happen to us. Do you have a sense of what his pitch is and what makes DC's proposed bill different than what we've seen in places that have AVs like Nevada?
I think Councilmember Allen does not want to simply roll over and just let this happen. He wants to figure out how to do this in a way that makes it work. One part of the bill, it's a tiny, simple little thing. It says there has to be equitable access in all 8 wards. It's very easy to imagine a world where these Waymos only hang out in downtown and just kind of churn trips, right? And folks in Ward, say 7 and 8, don't get any access to these pieces of technology. It's very easy to imagine that. And so ensuring that equity is something that he doesn't have to be a part of the bill, but is. And Waymo said, we know this can only work if it's in all 8 wards. They said repeatedly, we understand there has to be equitable access. And that's, good to hear. The way that this bill is different is, and by the way, it's really in flux, just to like a little bit behind the curtain. As people were talking, Councilmember Allen said, I realize that actually the language in the bill isn't that clear. That's a good suggestion. We are going to change that for this next version. So this is very much in flux, which means if you care about this, you can have a conversation with the council member or your council member and, let them know if you have a great idea. Just, a plug for civic engagement. But the reason our bill is different is we charge very high fees. In Nevada, the one-time application fee for an AV company is $500. The proposed fee in DC is $1 million. So that's a couple zeros different. We also try and suss out the liability part of this. I'm sorry if it's too early in the morning for tort reform, but let's get into it.
It's never too early for tort reform in this house, Ben.
Let's run it. All right, good. So who is liable if this Waymo hits me and I'm walking down the street, right, to get Julie's empanadas? It hits me, what happens, Do I sue the idea of a computer? Do I sue Waymo? Do I sue like the person who put the one line of code in there? So the Trial Lawyers Association, also a very important part of our community, our legal community, put in the bill, hey, you have to figure out who we can sue here, because like the idea of forced arbitration and me having to sue the company to show that there's a defect in their product is a huge barrier to cross. Another different part of the bill is we have a 15-cent miles traveled tax on these AVs. So the point of this is to make it so that these vehicles are not just circling DuPont Circle waiting to get pinged to go do a ride. So every mile that the vehicle travels, it's 15 cents. Because I can tell you, there's, videos in Atlanta. I almost said movies. Wow, I'm 100 years old. There's videos in Atlanta on social media of just like a neighborhood cul-de-sac and just like 8 Waymos circling it constantly because they're just like, they got stuck. So that 15-cent tax is supposed to remove congestion of these things just driving around for no reason aimlessly. And that is something that apparently is not anywhere else in the nation. And there's also a cap of 200 vehicles upon the initial application. All of these things the AV companies are upset about, and they've asked the business community on their behalf, or maybe the business community came up with it of their own accord. But the business community asked on behalf of the tech companies, I have a feeling, like, can you tell them that this is bad for business and this is only going to increase prices and so on? And can you get rid of these caps and limits and fees and et cetera?
Yeah, I really feel that all of these little pieces of consideration, I feel that it's not just a conversation about AVs. We're sort of working these out generally when it comes to conversations about AI and advancing technology. There's this lawsuit right now, the AI company that makes AI hiring software, Workday. A judge just decided that a lawsuit that alleges that this AI hiring software, Workday, that was discriminating against Black, older, and disabled job seekers, that the company who makes the AI, a lawsuit against them for discrimination can move forward. So this is the company that makes the AI. They can face a discrimination lawsuit for how their AI hiring technology was used by companies. And so I say that to say, it's very much not settled, and we're very much sort of having conversations about who can I sue if this goes awry. We don't know. Generally, when it comes to AI, we're still sort of working it out. And so I don't know. I just think that it's one thing when you're applying that to the unacceptable experience of facing discrimination when you hire for a job, which nobody should face. It's another thing when you are talking about whether a car might hit you or harm you, or in some cases, not with Waymo, but in other situations with AVs, perhaps even kill someone.
The stakes could not be higher than human life. That is exactly right. One of the questions that Councilmember Allen asked, and I'm already going to interrupt myself, I sit through a lot of government hearings, and a lot of times you get kind of like, what is a Facebook questions from, council members who spend their days legislating a lot of different things and not necessarily technology. Councilmember Allen seemed to be very intentional and had really good questions. So Councilmember Allen asked, do you train on more than just white faces? And the answer was yes. We use a large data set that is international, that brings in a lot of different people to train, hey, stop, don't hit this human being on. And they've said, they being Waymo, we've seen no data to show that it is any less effective with people who aren't white, because we know that there are a ton of facial recognition issues when it comes to anyone who isn't white. The disability community also said, hey, did you train it on people in wheelchairs? People with seeing eye dogs? Because those are, quote unquote, non-standard shapes that the technology would be looking for. And the transportation union also said, how are you going to handle First Amendment activity here in DC? If there's an elephant walking down the road, right? Hell of a permitting process. But if there's an elephant walking down the road, it is not going to recognize it as a thing it has seen before. Or like those giant marionettes.
Or the giant rat. How many times have y'all seen the giant rat downtown during protests?
Yeah, shout out Scabby the rat. My boy, Scabby the rat, yeah.
Not you knowing Scabby's government name, Ben.
Shout out union activity. The technology's probably not trained on Scabby, right? It's not as familiar with it as I am. So will it identify it as a thing that needs to stop upon? Or is it going to think it's like a mural, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know what that is. That's a giant blow-up rat. I'm just going to keep on pushing. So they've said, yes, we've figured it out. It's all good. But like, I don't know, how much scabby interaction has it had? It is hard to believe fully and be like, okay, well, I guess let's just let it go. And they say like they've driven all these millions of miles and they've trained it on this stuff. But like, there's still a lot of skepticism that I think is pretty fair.
And, I want to make clear that this question about what data sets and what faces was this technology trained on, it's not like a niche concern. There was, I don't know how deep into this folks want to go, but there was this early research that really raised some complicated questions about whether or not the early computer vision systems used in AV and self-driving technology detected pedestrians with darker skin as reliably as those with lighter skin, right? And so that's not, it might sound like the kind of question that is grounded in not knowing the tech, but there is some precedent given that DC is a city with a lot of Black folks, right? And so it's a reasonable question.
It absolutely is. And again, like what is, another question the councilman asked, what is the acceptable risk that we are willing to have, for the sake of innovation? What is like, I trust it enough that we need to get it out there. But it's like, I don't know, if like one of my friends gets hit, I'm not thrilled, man. Like that is an unacceptable risk, or if anyone gets hit, I'm not thrilled about it. What do we give up for the sake of innovation? Right. And it's a larger question that we have to wrestle with at the DC council level, because now that we have technology that is new and emerging coming into the district, it's a huge question.
So after all of this, what happens next?
So you're not going to see driverless Waymos on the street tomorrow. So if you don't like them, don't worry. Or if you're excited, sorry. What happens next is the council will come back in September after their summer break. And this will be one of the many things that they have to figure out. Now, the way the bill is written, January 1st, 2028 is when we can start seeing, if you go through all of the paperwork, all the fees, all the permits, etc., Jan 1, 2028 is when we could start seeing the first fleet of 200 vehicles and no more out on the streets of DC. A lot of steps between now and then. The bill, has to pass. It has to have not changed from what I just said and all those sorts of things. So we're still a ways off, and it's still a very fluid process. A lot of what the council member said was, we're going to take this, we're going to talk with our staff, we're going to talk with you guys over the summer, and we're going to figure out how to make a better version of this bill. So we are very much in the figuring it out stage.
Can DC take any notes from our neighbors in Maryland or Virginia? How have those states been dealing with it?
Are you saying that you want someone to take driving lessons from someone in Maryland? Is that what?
Absolutely not. I don't even want that concept in my name.
I was just checking.
As part of the public record together.
Well, yeah. Okay, no, I was just checking. And I feel that too, by the way. So the big thing about this in the Mid-Atlantic is we, being DC, are trying to lead on this. The AV companies have said we're very confident that we are going to get legislation done in Maryland and Virginia because, by the way, we're pretty capped famously on our size here in DC. So you cannot go beyond the bounds of DC should this bill pass. And we know it's very porous borders around here, right, in the DMV. So it's like it's helpful for getting around DC, but not like, going home, say, for a lot of people, right? So we need to work in a regional sense, ideally, to make this a very usable piece of technology. Now, some of the questions that were asked were, let's start in DC and then let's figure it out, because as Councilmember Allen said, I don't get to make the laws for Maryland and Virginia, which is very true. So to make it a big regional thing, we have to figure that out on all ends. But right now it is just DC. And so the cues we would be taking are, what is interesting to you all and how can we best be partners with the concept of this with Maryland and Virginia? Because right now we're out ahead of them, seemingly, on this.
So even if this bill were to pass and there were Waymos on the street with no human driver tomorrow, I still couldn't take a Waymo from my apartment in the District of Columbia to BWI.
Correct. You could not.
And I do know that the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, has been pretty vocal about wanting this kind of technology. But as you said, DC is still out ahead, even though he's been pretty vocal about wanting this technology.
Right. He needs to work with his legislature to make that happen. Waymo has said, like, we're coming to Baltimore. And in the same way that they said, we're coming to DC, there are no laws legislating this, in the city county area or in Maryland, as far as I know. So there's still a lot to be figured out. But again, like you say, this is the playbook. Like, we're coming and we're going to figure this out. And like, how else are you supposed to figure it out? Like the slow deliberative process, like that's boring. I'm Silicon Valley. Like, let's just say stuff and figure it out later. We got a lot of money. We'll do it. And so that's the vibe.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for being here and for keeping track of this complicated conversation. Maybe I'll see you in a Waymo soon. Who knows?
I'll see you in a Waymo soon, bud.
That is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friend who loves or hates the ideas of Waymos? You can rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.